But yeah, the mustache.
Okay, no, all rise. You may be seated. Court is now in session in the case of the U.S. military versus Captain John Yossarian. At this time, we will hear the prosecution prefer its charges. Prosecution, if you would step forward.
The prosecution is seeking the charge of absence without leave in that Yossarian did at Pianosa or on or about August 23, 1941, without authority, go from his appointed place of duty, to wit, the air base at Pianosa. We are seeking forfeiture of 2/3 pay and confinement for 6 months. The next charge prosecution is seeking is charge of assault of a superior officer in that Yossarian did on board his plane above Pianosa on or about June 16, 1941, assault Mick Watt, who was known by the accused to be a commissioned officer of the United States Air Force, by strangling him. We are seeking dishonorable discharge, forfeiture of pay, and confinement for 1 year. The third charge prosecution seeks in the charge of malingering in that Yossarian did at the base in Pianosa from about February 8, 1942 to March 13, 1942, at time of war, for the purpose of avoiding service as an enlisted person. Feigned mental derangement. We are seeking dishonorable discharge, forfeiture of pay, and confinement for 1 year. The final charge prosecution seek is the charge of sexual assault in that Yossarian did at the Pianosa Hospital on or about February 20th, 1942, unlawfully grope Nurse Duckett's genitals with his hands. Prosecution seeks forfeiture for pay and confinement for 6 months.
And defense, how do you plead?
Not guilty.
So let the record reflect that is a not guilty plea on all charges. At this time, the court will hear opening arguments from the prosecution.
Good morning, Your Honor. My name is Sarah Shokat, and today I represent the U.S. military with my co-counsel, Robbie Baker. Your Honor, today you'll learn about Yossarian, a soldier in the U.S. Air Force who failed to uphold his duty and conduct himself in a manner befitting someone in service. You will hear evidence that Yossarian conducted himself in a way unbefitting of military standards for multiple months. Your Honor, today you will be hearing from 9 witnesses, all testifying to the various charges listed before. Our first witness, Milo, is a standing mess officer for the military, and he will prove that Yossarian was actively avoiding his duty to going to Rome without proper leave. Our second witness, George, a Roman police officer, will testify to this as well due to his capturing of Yossarian without proper papers. Our third witness, Corn, a colonel in the military, will also testify to Yossarian's lack of proper documentation on his stay in Rome. For our charge of assault on a superior officer, our fourth witness, Mick Watt, an officer in the military, will testify to the fact that he was indeed attacked by Yossarian on the plane, not only putting both of their lives in danger, but also Al, a new bombardier who was flying with them. Al, a bombardier for the Air Force who was on the plane with Yossarian, and Mick Watt will testify to Yossarian's assault on Mick Watt and the danger it posed to them in the situation. For our third charge, malingering in the hospital, our fifth witness, Giuseppe, a soldier in the military, will testify to the fact that he was being impersonated in the hospital by Yossarian. Our sixth witness, Giuseppe's brother Junior, will also provide more information on the same matter. Our seventh witness, A. Fortiori, Dr. Sanderson, who will testify to Yossarian's mental state, as well as the assault on Nurse Duckett, and finally Nurse Duckett, who will testify to the fact that she did indeed have her genitalia groped by Yossarian with the help of his friend Dunbar, Your Honor.
Thank you, Counselor. Defense, we will hear your opening arguments.
Good morning, Your Honor. If it may please the court, my name is Emmy Grubel, and I'm here with my co-counsel, Holly Dixon. It is our privilege to represent Captain John Yossarian in this case before you today. The prosecution has attempted to explain what they hope will prove the defendant guilty, but I am here to show you all the facts that will prove the innocence of John Yossarian. The prosecution claims that the defendant has violated these 3 military codes of conduct with the following situations. Article 86, absence without leave with Yossarian stopping by the airbase at Pianosa. Article 115, malingering with Yossarian filing for illness during a time of war. And Article 128, assault on Nurse Duckett and McWatt. Your Honor, I would like to take the opportunity to reveal the circumstances in which my client was exposed to during the time that these charges supposedly occurred. Yossarian is a victim of not only a brutal and exhausting form of work, but an apathetic and overwhelmingly chaotic way of government. Yossarian was and still is a young man in the prime of his life. Before he joined the Army, he worked hard every day, looking forward to Saturday nights at the bowling alley or at the local diner. He wanted to meet new girls, look for someone to settle down with, and make a new life with. He had a passion for his country and took part in every scrap drive, silk rationing, and victory garden he could, but he never expected to be forced to fight. He enjoyed his life. He was the gung-ho patriot ready to sacrifice everything but his life. He had the utmost respect for anyone fighting in this war, but he could never face all that pain and death himself. He was afraid of dying just like the rest of us. He continued living this life until the draft board came. They took him and sent him to the 256th Bombardment Squadron in Pianosa, Italy. Here he was forced to fly mission after mission without respite, while those around him died in his arms. We are here today because of the awful conditions the men in our military are faced with day in and day out because of the grievous shortcomings of our Army's superior officers. Yossarian and the other men in the 256th Bombardment Squadron have gotten caught up in the drama of this disorderly and anarchic government military that all of us, including Yossarian, once trusted. The authorities that are designated to overlook the men working in our military and protect them are indifferent and unorganized, leaving the men with absolutely nowhere to turn. When one of Yossarian's best friends, Nately, dies, he is utterly devastated. At this point, it is the job of the superior officer to intervene and ensure the well-being of men under his command. In most cases, they would assign leave and require the men to pursue some sort of help or closure. With the lack of organization, discipline, or caring in the 256th Bombardment Squadron, Yossarian was left with little help. He was assigned leave, but issues with details of allowed leave, including the miscommunication of length, location, and confirmation of leave between himself and Colonel Cathcart, have brought us here today. Here to prove this is Colonel Cathcart, Major Major, and Major DeCoverly, all highly ranked authorities in Squadron 256. Colonel Cathcart will tell us about the circumstances surrounding the war and life in the squadron, as well as the details about Yossarian's mission and leave pass. Major Major will tell us about the harshness of the 256th Squadron and more about the mission number and the crazy requirements no other squadron faces. Major DeCoverly will tell us about common practices of leave and his job on base. Arfie, a pilot in Squadron 256, will detail to us the circumstances surrounding Yossarian's arrest and about the heinous conditions in Rome and on the base. Another point, the military authorities refuse to properly oversee the instruction of pilots and training of lower-ranked men in flying. This oversight causes great issues with the safety of pilots, crew members, and anyone else around. McWatt, for example, is one of these pilots in need of instruction. He was known to continually fly in dangerous and erratic patterns, putting not only the life of himself and his crew in danger, but everyone around. To prove this correct, we will call on Kid Sampson and Orr, both pilots in Squadron 256. Kid Sampson will testify to the pattern of McWatt's dangerous behavior and how he was even killed by one of McWatt's insane flight maneuvers. Orr will also testify to McWatt's reckless flying and to the character of Yossarian as well as the underlying problems of the squadron. Another major problem is the military hospitals are crowded and in total pandemonium, which often leads to mistakes in documentation of patients, incorrect care of patients, and the distribution of unsuitable medications, all which Yossarian has experienced and been influenced by. We should especially consider the environment of the hospital when discussing the relationship between Yossarian and Nurse Duckett. We will question Dr. Nika, a physician, and Dunbar, a pilot and former hospitalized patient, to prove this. Dunbar will testify that it was him who assaulted Nurse Duckett and not Yossarian, as well as the horrors of life in the military hospital and the Army. The defendant will have professional and knowledgeable witnesses testifying to the discrepancy of the charges against him. Finally, Doc White, the specialist, will testify on behalf of Yossarian regarding the malingering charge. He will show the court medical documentation that shows Yossarian was actually sick and give details to Yossarian's medical history and experiences. Your Honor, at this time, based upon the facts that I have outlined and will be presented in this case, I ask that you will find my client, Yossarian, innocent of all charges and be awarded back pay in the total sum of his time in confinement. Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you, counselors. At this time, the prosecution may begin to present its case by calling its first witness to the stand.
Your Honor, the prosecution would like to call forward Milo.